Yeah, I think for sure there seems to be a dichotomy in the way uh, the government is looking at this issue. At one end, the CBD, they're basically talking about how concerned is the government on biodiversity issues. But a couple of 100 kilometers away from Hyderabad, we have experienced severe cases of loss of biodiversity because of coal mining. I'm talking about the Singrauli region and Mahan region in central India. There are lots of pristine forests being cut to mine coal. And that for me is quite a contrasting side of the government, and that's precisely what we're saying, that it needs to put one face and not two, and therefore that aspect is what we're talking about, and that's what our campaign is all about.
We interviewed some tuk-tuk drivers outside the conference centre 2 days ago. None of them said India had any environmental problems at all. Is this a difficult one for the government? Because it seems many of your average Indian citizens are happy so long as the lights stay on, and they are developing in terms of being able to buy better goods and have a better quality of life.
Yeah. I think this is straight getting into the environment versus the development debate. Whilst I don't get into the debate because of paucity of time, the fact of the matter is we have to keep in mind that 65 years of independence, even today, 400 million Indians do not have electricity at home, and that's something to say. This is despite rampant mining. This is despite the fact that the government has already dug up a lot of mines. They're still looking at digging up larger acreage of pristine forest for mining, but the fact of the matter is 400 million people do not have access to electricity. So that's telling in the way this entire debate is all about. And unless there is a paradigm shift in the way we look at energy, not just for generation but also for access, this debate is going to continue, and still millions of Indians are going to stay without electricity. And that essentially means that a radically different approach to the electricity problem and to the energy problem needs to be discussed and investigated. What we are talking about is a decentralized renewable energy paradigm, where not only is renewable energy, it's also decentralized, which addresses the gamut of the entire climate issue: climate change, CO2 emissions, employment, jobs, development of a different kind. And that's precisely what we're talking about in terms of what does it do to people. When you talk about the tuk-tuk drivers, you're talking about people who are living in a city who, despite their socioeconomic condition, they may still have access to electricity, which is very different from 70% of the Indians who stay in the villages and who have no access to electricity or partial access to electricity.
Let's get back to the issue surrounding your press release and the focus on the exploitation, the ravagement of the Indian countryside. I guess the obvious question is, what would you have the government do if you need to have this coal to keep the lights on? What would you have them do? What's the alternative?
Well, like I just said, of course, renewable energy is the solution. India is a country which has such a large volume of solar penetration. There's so much of sun available in the country. We are already in the world one of the largest suppliers and users of wind electricity. The fact of the matter is that it needs to be seen how can this be harnessed, and how can proper incentives be given by the government to accelerate this process where acceptability of renewable energy is more pronounced. At this point in time, the government seems to be giving subsidies on all the wrong things, on nuclear, on fertilizers, on things which are all unsustainable. Why not move even a small percentage of the subsidy to the renewable energy sector, and use a governance process where it is decentralized, governed by people? And I think we got a win-win combination. You have energy access, you have electricity, and you're not accelerating the process of climate change. Decentralized renewable energy is the solution for us.
I read an article in India Today magazine recently accusing the current Environment and Forest Minister of being a green terrorist, saying that she was habitually blocking effective coal mining operations all across India, and this was destroying the economy and slowing down development. Is that really the case? Are the governments standing up against these coal mining developers? And do you think, is there a very strong development lobby out there as well?
Well, I haven't read the magazine you're talking about, so I can't comment on that. But if what is being quoted is true, I think that's a step in the right direction. It is, of course, the environmental minister's job to ensure that these things don't happen. And if she said so, then I think that has to be appreciated. I do, of course, have seen the letter she has written very recently to the Prime Minister on the National Investment Board. And several of the points she has raised in that letter seems to be messaging in the right direction. And I think it's very important for the government to consider what has been said in the letter. Large parts of it is also what we have been talking about and telling. So it's a matter of time before what the environment minister is saying. We'll have to see what it translates on the ground. But if that's what the magazine you're quoting has, if that's what she has said, I think that's a step in the right direction, but a lot more needs to be done, especially in the issue of coal mining, which we're talking about Mahan, because that's happening right now, and things need to stop now over there. We are talking about a complete moratorium on all new mining in that region and everywhere for coal.
What can organisations like Greenpeace do to mobilise public opinion? Because politicians aren't interested as long as they're getting voted in.
Well, I think the fact of the matter is half of the job is already done in terms of energy access and energy and electricity already being a political point during elections, right? But the fact of the matter is that organizations like Greenpeace, we also work on the ground, not just with people of individual people who give us money and align to our campaigns, but also the affected folks who are there on the ground. We have had presence in Singrauli and Mahan for the last 2 years. I've been working in the villages, and we have been talking to the villagers, listening to their point of view, and allowing them to get their voice up. So I think it works both ways. That Greenpeace, we have been mobilizing larger numbers of people for our campaign. Our campaign, which is called Janglistan, basically has about, in my understanding, about close to about 300,000 online supporters, and the numbers are growing as we speak, and hopefully we'll be able to give those petitions to the Prime Minister when he comes tomorrow. But even otherwise, we're working on the ground. So we are doing a mix of mobilization both on ground and online, so that this issue is propagated to a larger audience for both people who are not affected and both people who are affected on the ground currently.
Two more quick questions. I'm being told I have to wrap up, but I have two more quick questions for you. The first is the recent power cuts in India. I think it was mostly North India. A lot of that was blamed on the antiquated energy distribution system. What is the potential of improving that and thereby saving electricity or making huge efficiency savings?
What we have been essentially saying is that this country needs an alternate energy paradigm, right? We are calling it the energy revolution. What is the energy revolution? What we are basically saying is that we need to move away from carbon-intensive generation or unsafe generation like nuclear and get into renewables. But what that also essentially means that whilst the journey is being covered, there are several things which can happen in the middle to bridge the time which is needed for renewables to go to grow upscale and grow and upscale. Energy efficiency is one of them. Transmission and distribution losses in India is one of the highest, right? That's partially because of the antiquated technology we are using or the transmission lines we're using, and there's a substantial amount of energy which can be saved just by looking at energy efficiency processes, both at the generation end and also at the consumption end. I mean, even at the mining end, if I may say so. So I guess T&D losses have an important role to play in the interim and in the future to ensure that those kind of disruptive power outages don't occur in the first place.